r/ask Reddit. Former neo-Nazis, members of hate groups, what was your "I need to get the hell out of here" moment? My niece in Romania married a neo-Nazi last year, or at least we thought he was because of his long Facebook history, racist tattoos, prior arrest for hooliganism, etc. I had a 4-hour car ride with him and had a long chat. He quit because he left the Romania for a little while to work in Amsterdam. His co-workers were from all over the world, including African countries and Israel. He realized everyone was pretty much the same after drinking with them and smoking a joint after work. There was nothing about them worth hating, they were doing the same thing he was. He basically quit Facebook and started getting his tats modified, and hasn't touched politics at all since 3 or 4 years. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. Travel is a great way to open your mind, but you have to be willing, or forced, to truly engage with local people and learn about their culture. There are plenty of people who do the tourism thing, book nice hotels, enjoy being somewhere exotic, travel back home and continue to be just as racist. Those tourist traps are a bubble. Working in tourism, I can definitely say there are two groups. One wants the off-the-beaten-path local places, oddities that most don't see. The other just wants to have been. Those groups aren't so different, they just have different criteria for having been there. The more adventurous crowd is just preparing the next tourist trap by wanting tourism to reach further and further into other societies. I had a couple neighbors who were very racist. They were not good people to begin with, dealing weed, driving drunk and all that, basically scum. They went to the UK to look for a better life but ended up doing the same, dealing light drugs and stealing phones and cameras from stores at night. The difference is that in the UK they were doing it with a lot of other guys from a whole bunch of other countries, from all over Europe, Asia and Africa. They're still shitty people, but they're no longer racists, so at least there's that. This is basically what changed my opinion about gay guys. I'm from East Europe too, we don't have gays here and it's all a huge taboo topic. Went to the UK, had several friends and classmates who were openly gay, realized that they're normal people just like anyone else, and now I'm kind of ashamed. Aim here. I'm from a culture that is quite religious and not accepting of gay people. In fact, I'd never met anyone of my ethnic group who was openly gay. I still don't, it's really that bad. Growing up in the UK and meeting all sorts of different people helped me get rid of the bigoted thoughts I had growing up. Sadly, we still got numerous bigoted assholes in our community, but I hope that changes as new generations grow up. This is long, but I'm putting it out there. This was 30 years ago. I've probably only told this story 3 times in those years. It wasn't organized into anything identifiable as a group. It was more a large number of like-minded individuals living in the same North Alabama area. We all hated blacks. Weekend nights were spent at a few local bars surrounded by people talking about how some N_blank had done something stupid or how they'd run a N_blank off the road. You get wrapped up in that echo chamber, it's all you hear, the little things that happen between races start to seem like major trends. I went from being a guy who went to one of those bars as a joke, to making friends with people there, to having them, and that attitude become part of my life. I lived that life, I was that guy. You want to fit in, so you find your own stories to share. You start subconsciously seeking out anything that supports the racial stereotypes that fit the narrative of the group. You find huge fault with the minor things that make us different. Those people accepted me, they were MUI support group, my pseudo-family. Almost my entire social circle was made of people who hated every other race. We had some amazing times together. Huge loving Christmas gatherings, vacations, hunting trips. It's not like everything we did was centered around racism, it was just an underlying theme that would come out every now and then. I celebrated at weddings, cried at funerals, and danced when babies were born. I was in church with these people on Sundays, I helped build 2 Habitat for Humanity houses with people from that group, and we even raised money to help a local black family that had lost everything in a house fire. I think every group, everywhere, has a unifying thing that ties them together. This large group of people just happened to feel superior to black people. They didn't actively go out and do violent, evil things. They didn't all fly Confederate flags and spew hate. Most of them worked peacefully with black folks, most of them were willing to help out black folks who had met with something bad. They just all felt that their skin color inherently made them superior. Then there was one night that changed everything for me. There were a couple of dozen people hanging out around a bonfire behind a bar, and I was listening to this guy the first really didn't like go on a drunken rant about how white people and black people were different. He'd scream, "They all sell drugs," and I'd think, "Well, so do you, dumbass. They are all on welfare." He was living on disability scam checks. "They are all a bunch of thieves," coming from someone who have been to jail several times for stealing materials from construction sites. I quite literally sat on a log around that fire and had a moment of enlightenment. His rant was almost like a voiceover where everything he said, or everything someone jokingly added immediately made me look at who in that group was guilty of exactly what they were shading someone else with. I looked at these friends, these people I'd shared 100 meals and 1,000 beers with, and saw them all completely differently. There was nobody there I actually wanted to be around anymore. 10 minutes earlier I'd seen them as practically family. I can't really describe it, it was like they all changed. Physically changed. The longer I looked at them, the more they morphed. They were no longer those good old heart of the country people I'd loved, they were all ignorant. Their entire body of knowledge was little more than passed down excuses and cliches. None of them were actually contributing anything to society. They weren't making the world a better place. They were doing nothing except figuring out how to keep someone under them so they didn't have to be the bottom of society. They were exactly what they said every other race was. I was physically sick when the girl I'd been dating came over. I looked at her, and instead of the cute chubby little country girl I'd shown up with, she was just the spawn of generations of stupidity. She was as sweet as she could be, she treated me like her hero, and her family loved me. All I could see when I looked at her was every throwaway bigoted comment she'd ever made, every time she'd rolled her eyes at a black cashier, every snarky comment at the Chinese buffet. She had never done a thing wrong to me, and I've never felt a need to get away from someone so fast in my life. It was like I knew she was an anchor, and if I stayed with her I'd forever be one of these people. I'll never have the words to explain what those people looked like when I was leaving. They had all changed. I left that night and never looked back. I talked to the girl one time because she tracked me down at work, and I promised I was okay. My head was just all messed up, and I needed a little time alone. I called my mom, told her I needed to move home, 90 miles away, and by Friday I had ghosted that entire place and everyone in it. They were doing nothing except figuring out how to keep someone under them so they didn't have to be the bottom of society. They were exactly what they said every other race was. This was an incredible observation, and I'm so glad you were enlightened enough to get out of it. Long ago, buddy of mine quit the Klan after just barely not getting his head taken off by a .44 mag. He and his fellas were in their trucks driving along, and saw a truck driving through what they thought of as their town. Said truck had a black guy driving, and another in the passenger seat. Being the kind of fellas they were, they took exception to this and gave chase, hooting, hollering, threatening to run the truck off the road, etc. As my friend was leaning out his window to yell some nonsense, the passenger in the truck they were chasing opted to instill a sense of caution in the good old boys via a Ruger. My friend saw the pistol come out, had that moment of dread, saw the muzzle drop ever so slightly, and the side mirror on his truck vanished. He realized how close he'd come to death for what suddenly seemed like a very silly reason. Within a few months he was quietly packing up and leaving town, cutting pretty much all his social ties permanently. But did he learn to accept and not hate? 'Cause quitting the Klan after a near-death doesn't exactly mean he's not racist anymore. Sorry if this came off aggressive. Once he got away from the echo chamber he changed quite a bit. A lot of what he thought he knew got challenged on a daily basis, so he had to grow and unlearn what he knew. I was raised by white supremacists who were active in the movement in Canada. It occurred when I was 15, when I pretty much stopped just accepting that my parents were right on everything, and talking to my grandfather at the right time of my life, telling me how he ended up in Canada because his brother outed him as a communist and he had to run. I remember how in the hell does a communist raise a fascist? He said he could only give his children his morals and what he thought is right and wrong, but once they were adults, they were responsible for figuring the rest out, and that just as my mother rejected what he tried to impart on her, I could do the same. When your dad is an actual dissident, the only way to rebel as a teenager is go in the polar opposite direction, I guess. probably explains why a lot of alt-right idiots live in liberal cities also. It's all just a desire to be contrarian. Not me, but my grandfather evidently was a member of either the Klan or associated hate group back in the 1960s. He became a born-again Christian and walked away from it. There was little evidence of his history as I grew up. I only found out after my mother told me about it after he passed away. If you take your religion completely seriously and not hypocritically, it makes sense he'd do that, starting with the golden rule. Yup, coming from a Christian, it sucks that a majority of Christians in power, and many Christians who are normal people, alter the rules to benefits themselves and give the rest a bad name. Religion gives assholes so much leverage to amplify the effects of their shitty behavior. I started to get older and learn more compassion. I was a lonely kid and I didn't have many friends, and I already grew up in a racist household, and many of my family members are neo-Nazis, covered with white supremacy tattoos. I discovered a group of older skinhead kids and I fell into it pretty bad. As I was learning more compassion and slowly was shedding my neo-Nazi beliefs, my buddies were bragging that they beat the fuck out of another mutual friend of ours when he said he wasn't a Nazi anymore and he was dating a black chick. I was already thinking about leaving the group. It was basically a little gang. Once I found out they were beating up people for leaving, I realized it really was like a gang and I didn't want anything to do with it. I was shedding my racism and I didn't want to be involved. So I thought if I was a piece of shit enough to be a Nazi in the first place, I deserved to get beat up anyway, and if getting beat up meant I could get away for a life away from Nazism, then that was good enough for me. I've still been a neo-Nazi for longer than I've been an anti-Nazi, but I'm looking forward to the day I can say I've been an anti-Nazi for longer than I've been one. Damn. That was really heartfelt. I really wish you all the best and I hope the beating wasn't too painful. Luckily I didn't get beat up. I guess I should have mentioned that IDK if they actually beat up my friend. Maybe they were just trying to scare me. I just stopped talking to them. I ran into the ringleader a few years later. He married a Jewish girl and had a kid, which is funny because he had said when we were friends that if he ever had a crush on a damn, dirty Jew, we should shoot him in the head. Every single one of that group grew out of their hatred and put Nazism aside them. I have an acquaintance who works to help reform Nazis in Germany. According to her, a lot of people leave the movement not because they've had a change of heart, but because their lives have been threatened by their fellow Nazi friends. And since a lot of them have alienated their families and have no one to turn to for support or community, they will often end up in these formal, government-sponsored reform programs. She said that even though a drastic political shift might not be the catalyst for a person to join the program works with individuals over long stretches of time and with the aim of slowly shifting their views through mandated therapy and such. She said she's definitely seen some success stories, but has also seen some people who never quite have that change of heart. Who would have thought that Nazis don't make for great friends? There was talk on Twitter recently regarding the Proud Boys specifically, but broadly, the lack of solidarity and empathy within alt-right circles. They hate everyone including each other. My uncle was part of the KKK. He was very poor and homeless, and the KKK supplies you with housing and food and pays for things for you. But he tried quitting, and one day as he left a bar, he was jumped by members and had his chest slit open. He had to get around 200 staples, but he still quit. Thankfully. I'm sorry about your uncle, hope he's in a better place now. I didn't know that they paid for their members' housing and food. That's really interesting. Do you mind expanding on that a little? Not op, but gangs, and, by extension, hate groups, which tend to function as gangs, often provide forms of social service to relevant communities. This is one of the ways they can gain new membership, and why some communities tend to idolize or sympathize with them. Moreover, it's a reason many gangs are founded in the first place. When you've got nobody else looking out for you, they're there to protect you, to provide for you, to give charity in a crisis, or to give safety in a war zone. The Bloods formed to protect people when the Crips were beating and killing folk. The Crips were formed like a club to help black kids in poverty who were banned from groups like the Boy Scouts because of their race, like a social club, but also a sort of welfare network of its own. The Yakuza were some of the first responders to the tsunami, while the Mafia offered alternative economic growth and social status to disadvantaged Italians. Hell, in some places, the Mafia runs basic services like trash pickup. Organized crime and gangs in general are a sort of social net, so the KKK would be too by extension, I suppose. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe.